Well, good morning, everyone. We are so thrilled that you're joining us today for the Art of Business and Business of the Arts, a conversation with Gay Gaddis. My name is Heidi Marquez Smith, and I am the CEO of the Texas Cultural Trust. I'd like to extend a special welcome to Trust board members and our partners in the arts members. Thank you for your generous support in making conversations like this possible. I'd also like to recognize Texas Monthly Magazine for their collaboration in presenting this conversation today. Before we begin, I want to share a couple of notes. We will be recording this conversation and gallery tour for others to enjoy. That said, please feel free to ask questions using the question and answer button found at the bottom of your screen, and use the chat box found in the lower right-hand corner to comment at any time. Kenneth Franco, who you just heard from a moment ago, is the Trust Communications Manager, and he will share your questions at the end of the program. I would like to begin today's conversation by first setting the stage with a few simple facts. Number one is the arts strengthen Texas. The art and culture sector spurs our economy and generating more than $6.1 billion in tax revenue in one calendar year. The arts and culture sector also boosts tourism and creates jobs. 1 in 15 jobs is in the creative industry. Art and culture also enhances academic performance and prepares students for the 21st century workforce. All of these facts and additional ones can be found in the 2021 State of the Arts Report, which is a biennial study of the impact of the arts in Texas. And it's now available online at artcantexas.org. And it brings with it very distinct data worth knowing, some of which you'll be hearing more about today. I invite you to look at the report and encourage you to share this with your colleagues. It is meant to be a resource to support and advocate on behalf of artists, arts organizations, and arts education in Texas. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you today's speakers. Tom Foster, hi Tom, is editor-at-large at Texas Monthly Magazine. There he writes about business, innovation, and creative people. In addition to Texas Monthly, Tom Foster's work has appeared in Inc., Fast Company, Popular Science, Men's Health, Garden and Gun, and many other publications. He's a graduate of Trinity University in San Antonio. He'll be in conversation with Gay Gaddis. Hi, Gay. Who is founder of T3, a digital and marketing agency that rose to national prominence under her leadership for over 30 years and acquired by our LRW Group in 2019. An active spokesperson, artist, and writer, Gaddis is a celebrated author of Cowgirl Power, How to Kick Ass in Business and Life, and is also a regular contributor to Forbes and part of Fortune's Powerful Women Insider Network. She has received numerous awards, including the University of Texas McCombs School of Business 2020 Hall of Fame, the Liz Carpenter Lifetime Achievement Award, Fast Company's Top 25 Women Business Builders, Inc. Magazine's Top 10 Entrepreneurs of the Year, and C200's Luminary Award for Entrepreneurial Excellence. Gaddis is the first female chairman of the Texas Business Leadership Council, former chairman of the Committee of 200, also known as C200, immediate past board member for Monotype Imaging Holdings, Inc., and is on the board of directors of the Texas Cultural Trust. As an artist, Gaddis's bold and vibrant paintings have been shown in several galleries around the country, including a solo show at the Curator Gallery in New York City. She has been featured in Paper Magazine and named by Texas Monthly Magazine as one of the top 10 artists to collect now. That's surely a long bio, and Gay is truly a trailblazer. I don't believe there is anything she cannot do. She's a student of the arts, an entrepreneur, an author, and a visual artist. Truly inspiring, and I can't wait for you all to learn more and tour her studio. Gay and Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thanks for that intro, Heidi. I am so pleased to be here, Gay, with you. Let's just jump right in. One of my favorite kinds of stories. We're so good at telling stories at Texas Monthly, and Texas is so full of great big lives, you know, for us to chronicle. And you have one of those lives. And one of my favorite kinds of stories is the entrepreneurial sort of origin story. And I gather that you have a really great one. And I would love to start off with that, to give folks a little better understanding of sort of how you started to create the legend of Gay Gaddis. Where did it begin?
Oh, it probably began when I was 3 years old, but let's go to the story you want to hear. So in 1989, let's all dial back, if you can go back this far, and realize that Texas was in a terrible recession. Actually, the entire country was, but Texas was particularly hurting at that time. I say the real estate wasn't worth the dirt it was built on, and all the savings and loans failed. So I was working for an advertising agency and decided to take a bold new direction, but I made a mistake and I didn't bring the president of the agency along with me. So we came to blows almost, and I ended up quitting without even knowing what I was going to do. So I figured out I wasn't going to get a job anyplace else. No one was hiring. So I better go to start my own agency. And I did. And I cashed in a $16,000 IRA, that my savings account. That's all I had. And started up a little agency in Austin, Texas, literally in 1989 when times were tough. But we decided to do a few things differently. And I think that started us up on the right course.
Well, that's exactly what I would love to get into you know, starting any kind of a business is sort of a creative act, and you kind of have to have an angle, you know, much as being an artist, you have to sort of have your point of view. What was it as you went into creating T3 that you saw as the unique opportunity that you could create something new around?
Well, believe it or not, a lot of agencies back in those days were either very technical. And what I mean by that, they were all about the results, and it was direct marketing and things that before the internet. And it was things that were just kind of clunky in a way. And then there were agencies that were all about the art, winning awards, and just the beauty of it and the great TV commercials and the things they created. But a lot of times they didn't get results. And so I decided, what if we could blend the art and science together? And we really got results. We really measured everything we did. But at the same time, we were going to go out there and get awards. And this is amazing. But my little three-person agency at the time won two national, not regional, national Addy Awards in the first 3 years we were in business. And of course, that little team of three grew to 10 and 12 and along the way. But we were focused on literally kind of what we're talking about today. It was about let's do the most beautiful, wonderful, creative campaigns that win awards, but at the same time, they got to do good business and they've got to get results for our clients, or our clients will leave us. And I really couldn't afford to fail. You know, I was supporting my family. My husband's job was kind of tenuous at the time. And so we needed to have a success. And so I said, we're going to do the art and science and we're going to blend it together. And somehow the magic happened.
It's remarkable looking back now that that wasn't sort of the norm at the time. It sounds like you
I
really
know.
kind of reshaped how people approach the industry. It's that's really remarkable.
Exactly. Well, one thing I will mention, and then as we kind of moved early, and my company did move very early into embracing the internet and how to harness that, that was the real eureka for me because we could really measure things then. And so I embraced that with open arms because it was a way to truly show and prove our results.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we've talked about sort of the origins of your business story. We're here talking about business and the arts, and I'm curious, you know, where did Gay Gaddis the artist? What is the origin story there? Not just of your career as a professional artist, but perhaps earlier in life. Was there something that sort of that you experienced that created sort of a lifelong fascination with the arts for you?
I have to give my mother the credit, really, because she exposed me to the arts. We lived in a tiny town called Liberty, Texas, less than 10,000 people, but it was near Houston. And she would take me into opera, ballet, into the museums, and to look at art as a very small child. And she also owned a kindergarten. And to keep me out of the way and not bothering her students, she set up a little easel for me and some tempera paint and brushes. And I was able to go in and, you know, practice my own skills as an artist as a child, and I really liked it, and I was pretty good at it. So through elementary school and then later in high school, I got a lot of art awards in my little town and was encouraged as an artist. So I started off really being exposed, as I think it's so important for all children to just be around the artistic pursuits. and really open their minds to it. And so I was fortunate to have a mother who believed in that as well.
One of the things you've put a lot of attention of your own attention to lately is becoming something of a mentor for other people. I'm curious. Aside from your mother, were there teachers, were there other people you encountered as you came up that functioned as sort of mentors for you?
There really was. I had some great teachers, but one person in particular, and I'm going to show you this. This was my high school yearbook. I was the editor, and this is the woman who actually I give credit to for encouraging me to major in art at the University of Texas. Her name was Carolyn Hayes, and I dedicated the yearbook to her. Wonderful woman, and she was a real cowgirl too. She had a relationship with horses and could draw horses and did beautiful sculptures of horses, and I was amazed at her own work. But not only that, she was just really a great coach. Right there in that little high school of Liberty, Texas, we had the fortunate opportunity to be exposed to someone who really taught us about art. And she wasn't just saying, let's go do this project or that. She really spent time showing us some of the great masters, teaching us about some of the postmodern artists that we should all look up to and really model our thinking around. And so when I was graduating from high school, I started looking at, well, what should I really major in? And she encouraged me. She said, Gay, you've got a career as an artist. You need to do it. So I probably wouldn't have had the courage to go off to University of Texas and put my stake in the sand and say, I'm going to, major in art without Carolyn Hayes behind me.
That's so fascinating. I want to pick up on that thread in just a minute. One other question, just sort of about your earlier origins. What was there? You mentioned that she was a cowgirl. You said, was there something about? And you were in Liberty, Texas. Was there something about Texas that was formative for your sort of creative identity as well?
There has to be, because I was always taught that anything was possible. We had a big state, we had a big pride. And, I'll never forget. Yeah, this is so funny. The reason I went to the University of Texas was I was in love with art and I did want to major there, but there was something about the majesty of the size of that university. And when I would walk in the football stadium and look around, I would say, oh my gosh, this is like 10 times my hometown in here. It's a big place. And so I was excited by the grandeur, and the bigness of Texas. And it just kind of opened my thinking that, wow, the sky's the limit. Do whatever you want to do. And fortunately, I had teachers and professors at UT and other people along the way who said, go for it, do it. So Texas did play a part. And I'm really proud to be a Texan.
So uh, entrepreneurship in particular, but maybe even business more generally, is something that I'm always struck when I speak to entrepreneurs, how much their work sounds to me like a creative act. Certainly just building a business from scratch is creative by definition. But I'm curious for you, to what extent your career as a business person was informed by and maybe helped by your background in as a creative person, your background in the arts. How did that make you a better business person?
There's one thing in particular I want to accentuate today in that question you asked, Tom. And that is that I know a lot of us go to school, we study, we have different areas of expertise. And a lot of times the feedback that you get is the grade on the test or, where you stand in the class and all of that. But there's something unique about someone who is studying art. When I was in college, as I said, University of Texas, our professors were very, very keen on critiques. And so several times a week, our work would be put up. And there you were with all your peers, and there was your work on the wall. And people were able to give a critique, especially the professors. And it was tough sometimes. And, for an 18 to 21-year-old person to stand there and get kind of taken down in front of your classmates is tough sometimes. And usually, though, if you would stand back from it and really think about what was said in that critique, you realize that the person making those remarks were only trying to make you better. It wasn't about taking down me, it wasn't a personal attack. It was looking at the work and saying, should this composition have maybe explored a different color family, or maybe, the central interest of this piece or your piece of sculpture needs to have a different movement. And so those kinds of critiques are very important. And as I got into the business world and really kind of moved along, something hit me that, wow, that was a valuable lesson I had. Because then when we got critiques with our work, as in the advertising business, or I got critiques on, any of the things that we were doing, or people criticized us for whatever reason, I didn't take it personally. I realized that 90% of the time, someone was trying to just make us better and push us along. And so that was a wonderful, wonderful part of my art education that I will cherish forever, because it not only gave me a bit of a tough skin, but it made me appreciate that sometimes your detractors, or sometimes when someone is coming in to give a different point of view, that should be valued and listened to.
That's a fascinating answer. I did not expect that answer. I think that's such great advice. I'm curious, sort of on the flip side of the creative process is from what you just spoke about, is the actual idea generation and sort of, filling in the lines, color, you sort of come up with the shape, and then you figure out how you're gonna color that shape. And I'm curious, both again from sort of an artist perspective and from an entrepreneurial perspective, that actual idea generation, that sort of creation process. Are there things about that again, as a business person, we're sort of informed by your creative process as an artist?
Well, if you dial back, when I graduated from college, there weren't a whole lot of jobs out there, and there certainly wasn't a job for me to go and become a fine artist. I just couldn't have supported myself financially. So that led me to get into the advertising business, and I could draw. So we were drawing comps and doing all those things. And so I came up through the advertising business starting as a creative person. I was hired as a creative. I could write and I could draw. And so that's why I got in the ad business. But as I kind of moved through, I realized that I was better at the client relationships and better at selling the work than I really, and creating an environment for the work than I was actually producing that part of it myself. But I always appreciated the creative process and I understood it innately. It was part of me. And so when I would hire people and when I would start to really present work to clients, I understood what it took to get the best out of my creative teams, and then to help them elevate their work so that it would ever see the light of day. And so it's a very rewarding thing that through the years, I've heard thousands of people who were creative thinkers. And, I think as an art student or getting exposed to art as a Texas Cultural Trust is so behind is, getting these children in early school years and then all the way through to have an opportunity to be exposed and use their creative minds. It's so important because that plays out in business in so many ways. But I particularly had the joy of being able to, and still do today, to nurture people who are innovators, creative thinkers, and that's where the cool stuff comes from. And so I would just be delighted to see what my teams would come up with. One last thing on that helped me build my business is I am a big believer in diversity of thought. And that means you come at a problem or you get to a solution by building teams where people think differently or they have different personality types. And when we're all alike, you kind of get the same thing on the other end. But when you bring together diversity and diversity of thought, that's when the more exciting revelations come from. And so that was really the secret to building, I think, an innovative culture at T3.
That's a great seg to the next thing I want to talk about, which is, you created T3 in an industry that historically was very male dominated. I think many of us saw Mad Men, which is a pretty good depiction of how absurdly male dominated that industry was. What what did your being a woman bring to your experience of creating something in creating something entirely new in that industry? I'm Yeah, just that, I suppose.
Well, I have to laugh when you talk about Mad Men because I could still relate to that. I go back far enough in the industry, but I always said I was doing Mad Men with bell bottoms on. That was the era for me. But as you mentioned, yes, the advertising business was very male dominated. And here's what was happening at the time. And I started the agency in '89. There were women who were starting small public relations firms and little agencies, but very few were able to really grow their businesses and change that from just being a small shop into one of national prominence. And so I really used my creative skills. I used my techniques and being able to be persuasive. And somehow, maybe my Texas go to gut just said, go for the gusto. Don't let someone else take the place of yours. And so I was very much in this mode of putting myself out there, that's what I call it, and meeting people and getting out in front of people. And many times I was the only woman in the room. I'm still in a situation like that, and sometimes, but it just got to the point where I wasn't intimidated by it. And I decided that, you know what, I can do this. And my teams are so diverse and so wonderful that I've got to go out there and sell their work. So, I just decided that, someone had to do it. And I guess it was going to be me because being the largest woman-owned advertising agency in the country didn't come overnight. It was step by step and it was a long, long process. But somehow my team was behind me and we made it happen.
So we're here with the Texas Cultural Trust, and we heard some really fascinating statistics from Heidi at the top of this conversation about the impact of the arts on the Texas economy. I'm curious, from your perspective, what would you share, or what do you share with your peers in the Texas business economy, or Texas business leadership community, about the importance of the arts and maybe specifically arts education as something we need to be deeply committed to? How do you convince people of that?
Well, I think my own story is a testimony to that. And when I said that I hired creative thinkers, that's what this is all about. And so we're all looking right now, especially coming out of COVID, who's going to innovate? Who's going to have the next big creative ideas? And every business I know is looking for creative thinkers. In fact, the University of Texas is even putting together joint programs with businesses to find people who are coming out of creative thought processes who can change these companies and have the next big idea. Because if you're not moving quickly and adjusting, then you get left behind. And my business colleagues know this. So it's not always, and I'm a big believer in great business training and business school and all those things. And, it's combining that makes the magic. But we've got to have people who are willing to think out there. And when you're trained in the creative pursuits, be it music, art, dance, whatever, writing even, and great writers, they're challenging. They're thinking of different ways to do things. And that's what we all need. And let's just look at the stats. I mean, 84% of Texans believe that art is important for their children and for this state. I mean, it's a big part of our economy. And I try when I can to expose business leaders to just that economic impact that the arts do have on our great state. And moving forward, I think it can have even a bigger part because we want to continue to innovate. This state wants to be ahead, and there's some lofty goals out there. And we've got some amazing people moving to Texas right now, and they want to stay out in front. So we need those creative thinkers. We need the arts supporting these children all the way through so that they're ready to take on those new challenges and build a pipeline that we're going to need to fill these jobs and be the next great thing in Texas.
I think that's such a fascinating point that as our economy diversifies, and we need to make sure that we have the kinds of folks filling out our workforce, the next generation of our workforce who can do those jobs. Another sort of a corollary to that I hear sometimes in conversation with leaders around the state is talking about the effect of having a thriving creative scene, whether that's, you know, food or good coffee or good art or dance or music or, you know, all the things you're talking about, the the benefits to the wider community in having those kinds of creative scenes, whether that is, you know, the type of people who are willing to move to a city, the types of businesses that feed upon one another, the types of businesses that might move to the state, all the different things that can sort of lead to a feed off one another and lead to a thriving economy. Can you talk a little bit about that from your perspective? How do you see that playing out?
Well, it's very important. And a lot of the large companies or companies who want to move to Texas or are thinking about it, look at that because they want their employees and their families to have those options in the communities. And if a community is starved of that, it becomes less vibrant. And just think all the things you mentioned, Tom, you know, even a great place to have coffee that's creative or, you know, that it thrives on conversation and where people can have great ideas. All those things feed our soul, you know, and we need that. We can't just be all about the bottom line and dollars and, you know, just the business of the business. It's the other things that surround us that bring joy and bring ideas and bring beauty to us. And we all have to have that. I mean, just the nature around us. And we're going to look in a few minutes at my studio and how I'm inspired. But it's just, it's really something that is so important. Business and art go hand in hand. And I think one can't live without the other. We need it. Human beings need our souls to be uplifted. And that's what the arts and all these creative things can do to make us think bigger and have dreams.
Well, so again, a perfect seg. So, you know, if being surrounded by a thriving arts scene is sort of inspiration for everyone, here we are, virtually in your studio with your work behind you. I think everybody here would love to hear directly from you about the work that we're seeing here and you know your art.
Well, you know, it's a funny story because as I told you all, I started off in the advertising business because I needed to make a dime, and I didn't think I could do it being a visual artist, even though I wanted to. So I went and I did that, and so because of that, I'm a mom of three. You know, I was very involved in the community. I was growing a business, and I really did not have time to pursue any of the art that you see around me today. And so there came a day when a little bit of time opened up for me. And I'll never forget, it was in 2014. And I was driving back from the office and I made a left turn across MLK Boulevard. And I pulled into the art store. And for the first time in years, I bought some canvas, paint brushes, a little easel, and some paint. And I drug it out to our art branch and just set it up outside and started painting. And I thought, what the heck, you know? And my husband said, you know, Gay, you're never going to make a thin dime off of this, but don't worry about it. Just have fun. Just do it. Just enjoy. It's time that you could have a little bit of your hobby back. So I did, and I was frustrated. Tom, I was so frustrated. I was doing all kinds of things, very realistic paintings, wild paint splashes, a Jackson Pollock routine, and, you know, just all over the place. And I really didn't find my place again until one day I looked up at this beautiful Texas sky that I was surrounded with. And I got a giant paintbrush and a big canvas, and I started putting all the colors on my palette that I was seeing in the sky. And I just started painting them. And it just felt right. And so I was in the groove all of a sudden. And this first painting in that style came out, and I said, wow, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. But I did have a mentor in this. I had a woman in New York who's a fabulous fine art curator. And she actually came to Texas and started looking at my work. And she said, Gay, you know what? If you keep painting like this, I think you're going to end up with a show in New York. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. I mean, for me to go from, you know, totally running a business and still doing that, I was still running T3 at the time, to thinking of myself as an artist was unbelievable. And so long story short, and it's a story, if we have time, I'll tell you, but I did end up with the show in New York, a one-woman show. And it was the scariest thing that I had done in years. It was almost like starting T3 because when the show opened, and we had hung the show, and I walked in on opening night. I was terrified because I thought, what if no one likes it? What if the art critics come in here and shred it to pieces? What if no one buys anything? And I'm a failure at the gallery and, let them down. But somehow the magic happened again, and it was supported. The show was listed as a top 10 show to see in New York. And we sold 22 paintings in that show. And the funny thing is, Tom, I got my first check, a down payment for some of the paintings that had sold, and it was for $17,478.38. And I called my husband, who was still in Austin, and I said, Lee, guess what? I think I've made more than a thin dime in my art. So that was kind of the story. And then one thing led to another. And I've been fortunate to continue to sell my paintings. And I've sold a lot of work since 2016 in that first show.
That is amazing. Can you show us some of your artwork?
Yeah, we're going to go on a tour. Are we going to go to the, should we segue to the studio now?
Let's do it.
Ready? Okay. Yeah, let's go. Okay. I'm delighted to show you where all this happened. So come with me. We're going to go out of the gallery for a moment, and I'm taking you to my studio. John Blood and Elizabeth Danzy designed this, and architects from Austin, and they did a beautiful job creating something that is just spectacular. This is my studio and my environment. But I want to tell you, we named this Fossil Ridge Gallery and Studio and Creative Center because these are fossils that are literally right down this hill. And so this is built over a fossil ridge. And these are like 80 million year old sea fossils that are right here at our ranch and outside of Burnett, Texas. So come with me. This is the studio. And we're going to walk out here on the deck, which is quite spectacular because you can see when I bring my easel out here and paint that I can see the west where the sun sets, east expanse of the clouds, which we will see. But I can see just fabulous skies here. It's just, there's just no end to the inspiration, actually, that I see. And so now let's go inside my studio, my sanctuary, actually. It's a great place to think, write, create. And right now I have a little work in progress, a small painting on the easel. But this is a wonderful little space. Again, it allows me to position my easel in all different directions so I can, see what's going on outside. And at the same time, I love putting my brushes in these wonderful little green containers. And so the greens and all these things are part of my look in here. The other thing that is nice about having this space is that the giant windows just provide beautiful natural light. And so it's almost like I'm outside because I am a planner painter, but it's like I'm outside even when I'm in. So this has allowed me to paint through the ice storm, through the heavy rains and even high winds because I'm a bit protected from that inside the studio. One thing I'll show you is that before I had my real studio, my paints were all just stacked on a table, but we've done a nice thing to organize them by color. And I have all this organization in my shelves here. So that's a little behind the scenes of how I keep things organized here in my paintbrushes. Also, I want to show you a little something. I found this arrowhead in South Texas at my husband's family ranch on Christmas Eve one year. And it's a very cherished piece of this whole place here because it looks like a little Christmas tree, doesn't it? And I found it at the very end of the day on Christmas Eve many years ago. So that's part of part of the lore of my room here. I keep things around me that mean things to me and inspire me. It's important as an artist to stay, close to the things that you love. And I do love this ranch. So let's look at one other thing, which is a part of the possible secret of my paintings before we look at those. This is a little washstand for my brushes, but it's also where the rainwater comes out because I use acrylic. And so I paint only with rainwater. And we realized along the way that there was something important about that. When you paint with water that's been through a city system, there's always chemistry in it. There's chlorine, there's minerals, there's trace other chemistry that's in that water. And I am convinced, because my water is absolutely filtered, pure rainwater, again, what's going on right here, that it makes my paints go on more smoothly. and they go on like oil. And actually, when I did my show in New York, several of the critics came in and said, I think you're painting in oil. This doesn't look like acrylic. And I said, no, it's acrylic, but it's got to be the rainwater. Maybe, we think. If it's not true, it should be. And that's what J. Frank Dobie said. So we're going to go with it. Now let's go into the gallery, which I love. And I'm so fortunate to have been able to build this before COVID, all this, because it became our sanctuary retreat during this time. But let me kind of give you some of the new things that are going on. So you're getting to see at least several paintings that have never been seen before. And I'm unveiling them in what I call the Vistas collection. All my collections have different names, and this is the brand new one called Vistas. I love this painting here. It's quite large, 4 feet by 5 feet. So it's kind of big for me to deal with, but it has just an incredible amount of detail in it. Maybe you can see some of it. Even just kind of the back underpaintings in it make it very rich. Some of the painting is very thick on this one, as well as, you know, some of the thinner strokes. But I named this one Devils in the Details because as I was painting it, there were just thousands of little brush strokes and details that I was putting in to achieve that just incredible bright sunset that I was seeing, that also was in the midst of a thunderhead. So you get this thunderhead light coming from here, and it's truly kind of a magnificent piece, and just an incredible number of colors in it. This one was inspired by our bluebonnet season. It's very abstract in a way, almost a watercolor attempt here, but acrylic, with an abstract view of the bluebonnets. And I framed this one differently than I do the others because I just wanted this big frame to kind of set off the colors in the hill country and the sky around it. So this one is a little different than some of the others. And then as we go along, these are a little bit more my traditional style, but they are very subtle. I love these. They're sunsets and just grabs. It's almost like you take a piece of the sky, and not the whole vista, but a piece of the sky, and you're just grabbing that one moment that the sun is setting. And so those are very nice. This is a diptych also. And I enjoy doing diptychs and triptychs. I don't have a triptych in the gallery right now. I just sold a big one. But it goes back to my art history and art training. You know, that was a very popular thing to do back in medieval times. Even the triptychs were in churches and in sacred places of the Holy Family and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of hearkening back to my art history, which I had many hours of art history while I was studying. And so I love diptychs and triptychs. This is another really brand new one. I call it Glory Hallelujah. It's just a big pop of color, but it also has a little double meaning because I'd gotten my COVID vaccines and I went, Glory Hallelujah, I'm getting through with this. So this one is also very intense, bright, almost neon color. This one is called The Hint of a Strawberry Moon, and I paint moons. We'll see another one in a minute. And you can see this very hint of the strawberry moon. There actually is something called the strawberry moon every year in our lunar cycle. So this one picks up a bit of the sunset as the moon is coming out. And this piece is also very beautiful. It's another one of my big bright ones, brand new ones. You can see more of the hill country here with some of the abstract foliage. And we love this one so much that we decided to design a scarf out of this. So you can see these, we have a few left for sale. I did a limited collection of these and they're really quite beautiful, you know, when you tie them around you. So let's go for a little walk. This is an interesting piece of the studio, of the gallery. This is a movable wall. If you'll look, it's on rollers, and I can take this wall all the way to the back, all the way to the center, to the side, and we can actually achieve a different look and feel in the gallery based on the placement of this movable wall. It's really quite ingenious the way it was built. Now let's just kind of walk down this wonderful little section of the gallery created by the movable wall, and you will see other bright paintings, different kind of more my abstract pieces. This is a fairly recent one as well, which is small, and I do paint different sizes. Some of my collectors like small paintings, some need a really large one for a space, and so I paint in different sizes and different types of canvases to create different looks and feel. This was kind of a fun one. The moon was coming up while the sun was setting, so I like to capture kind of the phenomenons of the sky and whatever is going on at any given day. So like I said, I never have a need for new stimulation because the sky just provides incredible look for me to take from color and feel. This is what I call a silver lining painting because it was painted during COVID, but it was actually a beautiful cloud that was popping out in kind of a gray day. This is a moon. You can see I do paint moons, and this is actually quite a beautiful moon here. It's a little larger, and it has a lot of detail in the clouds around it. And if you turn around and look behind me, we had an interesting phenomenon also where the Sahara Desert sand blew through this part of the country and left the air just almost this gold colored. It was an interesting tone that I was seeing. And I also noticed that the buzzards were flying and gliding in the air. And if all of you see a vulture or a buzzard up close, they're probably one of the most unattractive birds that we see. But once they're in air and once they're gliding, they are absolutely beautiful. And I love to capture them sometimes gliding through the wind currents. And they were doing that on that day. Walking by here, you'll see some of my rain paintings because rain is important to us. Rain brings life. And when you're hay farmers like we are and we're ranchers, you got to have rain. So every day that it rains, it's kind of a blessing to us. And I like to capture sometimes the intensity of a rain day. And they're actually quite beautiful to me. And then kind of finishing, we have another beautiful sunset. And then this one is an actual, just absolute love of all the color that you see in a very abstract piece that captures all the tones as they go down into a melting sunset. And then from the larger paintings, we're going to conclude with this one. And this is something that happens if you're out in the hill country, you will see this. We have canyons all around our ranch house. And some days, because of just the right weather conditions, there will be a fog that sits in those canyons, and I call the fog lingers in the canyon. So as the sun was rising, the fog was just kind of sitting there with a very slight glow in the canyon from the sunlight coming up through it. So that's another beautiful big piece that I'm excited about. It's new, brand new. And then last, let's have fun with these. Sometimes, I just have a good time taking a tiny canvas and seeing what I could pack inside it. And so I talked to the people who frame my work and they said, we can frame those little ones for you. And I said, well, how fun. So I call these my jewel box collection. And I've sold a lot of these. People like them for gifts, for client gifts, even just to put on a desk. And just a small remembrance of some of my work. And they're all signed on the back, just like the big ones. I don't sign my paintings on the front unless someone asks me to do it because I don't want anything to disturb that sunset, that look, the feel. So even a signature would be a bit disturbing to me. So they're all signed on the back. This is an interesting little piece because this was the recent phenomenon of how Saturn and Jupiter lined up. And I was literally watching this and could see the rings of Saturn and the bright intensity of the Jupiter planet behind it and that orangey red tone. And so I had to capture this. Again, it was just something that we'll never see again in our lifetimes. So there it is on a small little place. So anyway, these are fun. And again, we've had a lot of fun with trying to capture a big painting in a small space. And these are tiny. So that concludes just the run through. So if we want to take some questions now, glad to open it up for that.
Yes, Gay, this is Ken from the Texas Cultural Trust. While you're having a seat, I just want to share with you that you're receiving a high amount of praise in our chat conversation right now. So thank you for that phenomenal, vibrant tour of your personal space and gallery. We have a number of questions for you. We'll start with Brandon Garcia from the Texas Public Charter Schools Association. Brandon asks, how have the elements of grit and innovation been a factor in your life? And what words of wisdom would you impart on the next generation of kids growing up today?
Well, I'm a big fan of charter schools, and I think that they are doing a great job with so many of our children who are many at risk or do not have other options for a great education. So bravo to the work you're doing. I had a bit of an interesting thing happen to me, and my camera looks like it fell. So I hope we can get that back. There we go. So when I was almost 13, my father died. And it created a situation for me and my mother where we were kind of strapped for cash. And I had to go to work when I was 13. So it was a very difficult thing for me. And I know that that created this sense of having to make money, learning how to run a business, because I had to do some things early on, and literally created a grit in me that I probably wouldn't have had. So, yeah, it was a hardship as a child, but somehow it made me better in the end.
Thank you. Laurel Morris asks, a while back on your website, you had a section about potentially developing a young women's mentorship group. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, I think what we're talking about is, are we talking about my new program at the University of Texas? I'm really excited to announce that.
I believe so.
I have, okay, good. One of the things that I have been, after writing the book, I started doing a lot of work around women's leadership initiatives and speaking to corporations and that sort of thing. So I've partnered with one of my great colleagues in business, Lynn Utter, who's a corporate giant, really. And she and I are going to be teaching through the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas, a women's leadership program, and it launches in the fall. And so we are so excited. We're just now taking applications, and I think in the chat, we can give you information, or if you're interested, just let us know, because we would love to have a very diverse group of women in our first program. We'll only take 50, and we're looking for women with at least 5 years of experience who are ready to take next big leadership challenges and take on their next part of their career. So love to talk to anyone about it privately, or follow up, because it's something we're real excited about offering.
On the topic of mentorship, Mary Summerall asks, Gay, you've inspired and mentored so many people. You've talked about some who mentored you. What are your thoughts on mentoring others, whether it's in advertising, business, art? Everywhere you go, you've been an inspiring leader. What would you say to others?
It's a great thing to mentor and bringing up people. And I have to say this, I've tried to do it through my career, but you also get to a point in your career or in your lifetime where it becomes more and more important, I think, because you want to share the lessons that you've learned, and whatever you're good at or whatever you've learned along the way, there's probably someone who could benefit from your great knowledge. And so be willing to share that. Be willing to give back and seek out the next generation of people who are trying to do what you've done. Give yourself a pat on the back. You've accomplished more than you think. And if you've had a career in any pursuit, then there's always someone who can learn from you. So it's worth every minute that you spend trying to give back to others, because honestly, I always learned this growing up, that when you give back, it all comes back to you in spades. So I highly recommend just spending a little time with school children, with students, with, either other people in your career through industry meetings or that sort of thing, that you can share some knowledge. It's a good thing to do.
That is sound advice. Lynn Nguyen, a K-12 fine arts administrator, writes, do you have any recommendations or thoughts on how we can create an infrastructure to promote the business and artpreneur in a high school setting? How do we go about encouraging that or creating that?
Well, that's a great thing to encourage. It's a great thing to do. And I will say that the University of Texas, I was working with Doug Dempster and some others who's now going out as dean, but was dean at College of Fine Arts at UT. And we talked about this. And so they've been very creative at UT about putting in an entrepreneur class, women's entrepreneur class. They have, the students working across the university on entities and programs and projects so that they can get the sense of working on a team to do creative pursuits. So I would love to see, and we can maybe brainstorm offline with this, but I would love to see it discussed even in high school. Talk to these kids that, what, art can lead to entrepreneurship, because as Tom brought out earlier, being an entrepreneur is a very creative pursuit. You have so many challenges. And one other thing that I learned, and you can talk to your students about, is as an art student, I learned to problem solve. Some of my colleagues in college would be like, Gay, why aren't you going into law? Or why aren't you, doing something really use your brain? I'd say, wait a minute. When I was in my art classes, every day I was problem solving. And those skills and the critique skills that I talked about earlier, learning to take critique, learning to problem solve, those all are the building blocks for being a good business person or a good entrepreneur. And so I say, let's start talking to the children, talking to the kids, and saying, being an entrepreneur is a great thing. And look at what you could accomplish by doing it. The last piece on that is that one of the reasons I'm doing my women's leadership program at UT, and we're going to accept entrepreneurs in that, by the way. And one of the reasons that I felt so good about working as hard as I did to grow a business is I love the fact that I gave creative people jobs. Being a job creator and putting food on their table and being a part of their lives and their families and giving them a place to practice their craft was probably the greatest blessing I've ever received. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing to pursue leadership, and it's a noble thing to be an entrepreneur.
Melissa Fontenette Mitchell asks, who are your top artists that inspire you?
Well, I go way back. I really look at some of the beautiful color, and I know this is maybe overused, but I love the Monet paintings. And this recent one that I did with the blue bonnets and kind of that watercolor painting was very inspired by a lot of the work he did with his water lilies and just the beautiful color. I love the Impressionist painters. There's just something about being bold with the color. And when you look at an Impressionist painting, and I just went to Paris not too long ago and went back and revisited some of my favorite paintings, Van Gogh, Monet, Manet, so many of the beautiful ones that you get close to them, and there are hundreds of colors in their brushstrokes. And so I'm very inspired by that. I love Chagall's work. It's very surreal and it had the kind of a magical feel to it. I wanted to collect a Chagall painting, but it was only $10 million, so I had to pass on that. I really love some of those. And then, there's some recent painters too that are doing some wonderful work. But I kind of get my inspiration, I still have to say, from the bright colors and bold brush strokes and thick strokes sometimes of our Impressionist painters.
And one final question, Gay. Emma Wine writes, how can arts organizations and businesses address critical issues like systemic racism, voter suppression, trans rights, and the global climate change crisis, while still marketing to Texas' entire population? How do they do that?
Well, you know what? Whenever you have a marketing message that you want to get out, you need to be creative with it. And hitting people on the head with something in a way that doesn't really capture their imagination, you'll never get anywhere. So if you're going to initiate change, and we learn this always through advertising campaigns and marketing campaigns that I was part of, is that you have to either delight, educate, use humor, use sometimes high emotion, but you've got to figure out how to capture that person's imagination if you're ever going to change anything. And so think about the creativity that you have to put around those messages, and then get them out there in a way that really resonates with your audience. One last thing on that is that the key to change and the key to making an influential statement is you've got to really get inside the head of that end consumer. Think about what's going to resonate with them. Where do they get their information? How do they think about things? How do they feel about things? And so we would always get into that mindset. And that's how we helped our clients. What is your customer really thinking today? What's on their mind? How are we going to break through? Because there's so much clutter out there. There's so many messages coming at us from every direction. How do we break through? So get inside that consumer mindset. What's going to make a difference to them?
Okay, that is sound and invaluable advice. And that concludes our Q&A section. We wish we could entertain more questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. The Texas Cultural Trust would like to express their thanks to Gay Gaddis, Tom Foster, and Texas Monthly for this very substantive conversation. If you enjoyed today's event, please encourage your friends and colleagues to join the Texas Cultural Trust as a partner in the arts. More information on this special circle of supporters can be found at txculturaltrust.org. If you saw any artworks today that piqued your interest, or if you would like to join Gay's mailing list, please visit gaygaddis.com. And as a gentle reminder, a portion of art sales made between April 5 and 16 will be in benefit to the Texas Cultural Trust. A link to her collection can be found in the chat box found below, and will also be shared with you via email later today. While we have you, we also want to encourage you to save the date for the 2021 Texas Medal of Arts Awards, our two-day star-studded celebration of that features the creative excellence, exemplary talents, and outstanding contributions of Texans in all artistic and creative disciplines. That is happening this year on October 18 and 19 here in Austin, Texas. Finally, we encourage you to follow us online at TX Cultural Trust and subscribe to our mailing list to stay up to speed on what's happening at the Trust. We have great events and special opportunities on the horizon, and we would love to see you there. For more information, visit txculturaltrust.org. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.